It was late, I was behind the diner again, and I saw a man get killed. The cold air smelled like grease and wet bricks. I'd just thrown the trash bag into the dumpster when a car door slammed. The sound was too clean for that alley. I looked toward the street. Silas Vance, a man my boss Dominic did business with, was standing over a guy kneeling on the wet pavement. The guy was mumbling something, frantic and low. Silas raised a small gun. He didn't say a word. There was a soft pop, more like a cough than a shot. The guy just folded over onto the ground. Then Silas looked up. His pale eyes found mine across the alley. A cold feeling spread from my chest down to my fingers. I couldn't move. He'd seen me see it. The world got quiet except for a leaky pipe dripping somewhere. I stumbled back, my hand pressed hard against my mouth. Silas didn't look away. He took a white cloth from his pocket. He wiped his hands, one finger at a time. He wasn't in a hurry. Then he cleaned his glasses with the same slow care and put them back on. He knew I'd seen everything. I was terrified. My whole body felt like a single tense wire, but I made myself lower my hand. I didn't look down at the body. I kept my eyes on him. He smiled at me then. It was a small, polite smile. It didn't reach his cold eyes. He gave me a slight, almost courteous nod, turned and walked back to his car. The engine purred to life and he drove away. I was alone in the alley with a dead man. The neon diner sign buzzed above my head. I finally made my feet move. I walked back to the door, but my hand shook too much to turn the knob on the first try. I pushed inside. My hand still felt the cold, greasy edge of the dumpster. I found myself leaning against the metal shelves in the stockroom. The sharp smell of cleaner cut through the alley's stench on my clothes. The stockroom door clicked shut behind me. I turned, and Dominic Rossi was there. He blocked the only way out. He wore a suit that cost more than my car. I pressed my back against the shelves. The metal was cold through my shirt. "You saw nothing," he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the small room. I didn't know what to say. I pressed a fist to my chest like that would help. I looked at his hands. His knuckles were split and bruised. The skin was raw and red. This was new. He saw me looking. He didn't hide his hands. He let me see the damage. It wasn't just business for him either. That was a small truth he didn't mean to give me. He leaned a little closer. The overhead light buzzed. "If you speak," he said, "they will take your sister, Maya, to ensure your silence." He said it as a fact. He didn't blink. I felt my heart stop. I thought I might be sick. He knew her name. He was so close I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. I could smell his soap, something clean and sharp. He didn't touch me. I didn't move away. The space between us felt heavy and warm. I wrapped my arms around myself. My fingers dug into my own ribs. He was my enemy. He was also my only shield now. I had to know. "Will you stop them?" My voice was a whisper. He didn't answer right away. He looked at me for a second too long. I didn't know what it meant. Then he gave a single, slow nod. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement. He would do this thing. The weight of what he didn't say sat in the air between us. I stayed because of that nod. Later, back in my apartment, I was scrubbing a plate under too hot water. The steam fogged the kitchen window. I'd already washed this plate 3 times. Maya watched me from our small kitchen table. She's 22, with pink streaks in her hair and charcoal smudges on her fingers from her sketchbook. "You're jumpy," she said. Her voice was light, but her eyes weren't. I fumbled the wet plate. It slipped and I caught it hard against my chest before it could fall. Cold water soaked through my shirt. "Just tired," I said. Maya got up and walked over. She stood right in front of me, blocking my path. She crossed her arms. "No, something's wrong, tell me." She refused to move, her bare feet planted on the linoleum. The overhead light caught the worried lines around her mouth. She was waiting for an answer I could never give. I saw the real fear in my sister's eyes then. It was a quiet, watchful kind of fear. I wanted to tell her everything. But the warning echoed in my head, his low voice telling me I was already marked. My eyes filled with sudden tears and I blinked them away fast. I looked down at the faded pattern on the kitchen towel in my hands. I dropped the towel and pulled Maya into a tight hug. I held her so close I could feel her heartbeat against my ribs. "I promise, you're safe," I whispered into her hair. It was the only truth I could give her. I didn't know how I could keep it. I held my sister and stared over her shoulder at the dark window. My own reflection looked back, a pale face full of secrets. The lie I just told her burned in my throat, and here's where everything changed. I moved toward the door, Silas Vance's warning echoing in my head. How was I supposed to keep that promise? I stood rigid in the dim hallway, the only sound the hum of the old refrigerator. Then the front door opened. Dominic Rossi stood there. He held my small suitcase already packed. "We're leaving now," he said. The overhead bulb made the gray in his hair look silver. He was a man used to being obeyed. A hot rush of anger hit me. He had no right to my things, to my home. My eyes darted to the hall closet. My emergency go bag was inside, behind the vacuum. It had my secret phone and all my cash. It was my only way out. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans. I had to get to it before he did. He saw me look. His gray eyes narrowed. He stepped toward the closet. His hand reached for the knob. I saw a faint white scar across the back of it. I didn't know what that look meant, but I knew I couldn't let him open that door. I lunged forward. My fingers dug into the sleeve of his coat. "Wait," I said, my voice too loud. I need my winter coat, it's in there." It was a stupid, transparent lie. He looked from my hand on his arm to my face. He didn't shake me off. He just turned the knob and pushed the door open. The closet was a mess. He reached in without hesitation. He moved some blankets and pulled out my plain black backpack. He held it up. It looked cheap and guilty in his hand. He unzipped it and saw the cash and the burner phone. He looked at me. His expression wasn't angry. It was something worse. It was resigned. He had expected my betrayal. He'd already accounted for it. Real quick, if you're here for the showdown, hit subscribe, because it's coming. The rest happened fast. My palms burned from scraping the doorframe. Next thing I knew, I was in a sterile comms room. A low hum vibrated in my teeth. Dominic stood over a phone on a metal table. His shoulders were tight. "Give me the update on Maya Finch," he said into the speaker. Silas Vance's voice came through, smooth and cold. "The perimeter was already crossed. My people confirmed it an hour ago." The hum seemed to get louder. Dominic's hand on the table curled into a fist. He didn't look at me. "How?" Dominic asked. The word was quiet. "A floral delivery," Silas said. "To her university dorm, a courier from the Volkov shop." The air left my lungs. The Volkovs. Flowers weren't a friendly gesture. Dominic closed his eyes for a second. He ran a hand over his mouth, his fingers pressing hard. I saw the weight of it hit him. My own fear was a cold stone in my stomach. Dominic stared at the dark window. "They're not waiting for a negotiation," he said. It wasn't a question. He picked up his car keys. "How many hours did your source say we had?" He was already moving. He was committing everything. I thought of my promise to keep Maya safe. I stepped away from the wall. I didn't ask for permission. I just moved to stand beside him, my shoulder almost touching his arm. He looked at me then. For a second, I saw the man beneath the boss. His eyes weren't calm. They were full of a terrible, urgent responsibility. It was for my sister. That was the only reason I stayed. The adrenaline left a cold taste in my mouth. Later, I stood in the penthouse's dark living room, my feet sinking into a deep rug. Dominic was sitting in a leather chair by the cold fireplace. He had a disassembled pistol laid out on a cloth. His movements were slow and exact. Each part clicked into place with a soft, final sound. I watched his hands work. They were capable and clean. I remembered those hands could kill a man. He didn't look up at me. "You should try to sleep," he said. His voice was flat. "I can't," I said. It was the truth. He picked up the last piece, a little spring. He held it between his thumb and finger. He didn't put it in the gun, he just looked at it. The light from the lamp caught the side of his face. His eyes looked tired. His shoulders weren't straight. They slumped forward just a little. It was the first time I'd seen him look worn out. My hatred for him felt fuzzy. I didn't like that. "Your sister is safe," he said. He still didn't look at me. "Because of you," I said. It wasn't a question. He gave a short nod. Then he slid the spring into place. The gun was whole again. It looked heavy and dark in his hand. He set it down on the cloth. His fingers brushed the fabric. They stayed there a second too long. "That scar," I said. I was looking at his right hand. A thin, pale line cut across the top of it. He looked down at his own hand. He turned it over slowly. "A kitchen knife," he said. The words were quiet. He hadn't meant to say them. He flexed his hand once, then let it drop to his knee. I moved without thinking. I walked over and sat in the other chair by the fireplace. We were only a few feet apart. The room was so quiet I could hear him breathe. I could smell gun oil and clean wool. My heart was beating hard. I looked at his hands again. I wondered if he'd ever been a boy who cut himself in a kitchen. He reached down beside his chair. He picked up a folded blanket, soft and gray. He held it out to me. His arm was extended. I didn't move to take it. We stayed like that. The offer just hung there. It was a small thing. It wasn't a professional thing. I saw the framed photo on the table then, the one he always had. It was turned face down now. I finally reached out and took the blanket. Our fingers didn't touch. He pulled back and looked into the dark fireplace. Something had shifted in the room. Neither of us knew what to say about it. One thing kept pulling at me, why the photo was turned face down now. The ghost of that silence stayed with me. I braced my hands on my bathroom sink. The water I splashed on my face didn't help. My reflection looked haunted. I was trapped. Dominic Rossi was in my living room. He knew about my go bag. He knew I wanted to run. I had to tell Maya something. My own phone was gone. I turned off the faucet. The drip into the basin was too loud. I needed to think. I opened the medicine cabinet. I took out bandages and aspirin just to make noise. My fingers traced the back of the shelf. They brushed against something flat and plastic tucked behind a box of tampons. I pulled it out. It was a small, cheap phone, a burner. It must have been left by a previous tenant. The screen was blank. I pressed the power button. My breath caught. A single green bar of battery life glowed. It was enough. This was my only chance. I listened. I could hear the low murmur of Dominic's voice in the other room. He was on a call. I opened the text function. My hands shook so badly, I had to type with my thumbs braced against the counter. I sent a message to Maya's number. Aunt Claire is sick, don't visit, I'll call soon. Our old code for danger. The phone made a soft, tinny chirp as it sent. I almost dropped it. I deleted the sent message. I powered the phone down. The screen went black. I had done it. A small act of defiance. It cut through the fear. I hid the phone back in its spot. I closed the cabinet door. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the tiny room. A firm knock shook the bathroom door. Dominic's voice came through the wood. It was low and flat. Clara, open the door. He had heard. I knew he had heard the click. The relief evaporated. My stomach dropped. I did not move. I looked at my own wide eyes in the mirror. I was not ready. The knock came again, harder. Now. My palms still felt raw. I sat in the study's leather chair. The air smelled like polish and old cigars. Dominic stood by the balcony doors. He held a thick envelope. I knew it was Maya's new identity. He had not chosen me. Something else had put us here. There was a difference. He turned. The gray in his hair caught the light. He placed the envelope on a table. His movements were careful. He favored his left side. You want to know the rules, he said. His voice was flat. It wasn't a question. I want to know why Maya is safe, but I am not, I said. My own voice surprised me. It didn't shake. He looked at me for a second too long. I didn't know what it meant. Then he did something unexpected. He leaned back against the edge of the desk. It was a casual pose. It made him seem younger, more tired. Your sister is an address in a file, a transaction. You are a witness. He picked up the framed photo from the table. He held it without looking at it. Silas Vance wants witnesses gone. And you do. I keep my word. He turned the photo over in his hands, his thumb rubbing the wood frame. My father gave this to me. He said a man is only as good as his oath. He looked at me then. His eyes were clear and hard. I swore an oath to my family, to protect this city from men like Vance. That oath binds me. It also pays for your sister's new life. I understood then. The photo was face down because the man in it was dead. His brother. The weight of that debt was in the room with us. It was in the set of his shoulders. My fear turned cold and solid. So your protection has a price? You are paying it too. He was quiet. The only sound was the distant hum of the city. Then he stood, walked over to my chair, and stopped very close. I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. I could smell soap and something faintly medicinal from his bandages. He did not touch me. The space between us felt warm and heavy. I held my breath. The price is doing things that would make that boy in the photo hate me, he said softly. He looked like he might say more. His hand lifted just an inch from his side. Then he turned and walked back to the balcony doors. He picked up the envelope for Maya. The moment was gone, everything else I could deal with. The thing he almost said was different. The city's cold night air washed over me on the balcony, smelling of distant rain and car exhaust. I turned to face him. He stood in the open doorway. He had changed his shirt, but the dark stain on his sleeve was still there. He watched me with those calm gray eyes. You asked what I wanted, I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. I have an offer. You need me to be convincing for Silas Vance. I will do that. I will be your perfect, compliant asset. I took a step toward him. The concrete was rough under my bare feet. But you use your power for Maya, a real new identity, a relocation far from here, enough funds so she never has to look back. You make her future completely secure. Dominic was silent for a long moment. His eyes moved over my face. He looked for the lie. I just held still and let him look. Then he gave a short, quiet laugh. It held no humor. "You are negotiating with me," he said. "You are a woman with a bag of tampons and a stolen phone. You are in my home and you are setting terms." He moved out onto the balcony. He winced slightly as his injured arm brushed the door frame. "I am the only thing standing between you and a war," I said. "You said so yourself, so yes, these are my terms." I felt a reckless calm. This was my line in the sand. He stopped an arm's length away. The wind picked up, tugging at his dark hair. He studied me. His expression was closed, but his breathing had changed. It was slower, deeper. He was deciding. He looked away from me, out at the city lights. His hand came up and rubbed at the back of his neck. The movement was tired. He left his hand there, his head bowed for a second. I saw the weight of it all on him. I did not know what to say. I just waited. "Her safety is contingent on your absolute performance," he said finally. His voice was low. "One mistake, one sign of rebellion, the deal vanishes." He looked back at me. "Do you understand the bargain you are making?" "I understand," I said. He nodded once. He reached inside his jacket with his good arm. He pulled out a simple manila folder. He held it out to me. "Your new name, your background, your first assignment." I took the folder. It felt heavy. "Study it. You start tomorrow." I opened the folder. There was a driver's license with my photo, but a stranger's name. There were bank statements, a college degree. It was all so real. This was the price. This was my life now. I looked up at him. He was watching me, his face unreadable in the dim balcony light. I had gotten what I asked for. I had never felt more trapped. That question, what he'd done to get that folder, sat there like something unfinished. The cold weight of the dossier still pressed against my ribs. Dominic's office door closed behind me with a hushed click. I walked to his heavy oak desk. I pulled the folded newspaper clipping from my pocket. I smoothed it flat on the polished wood between us. Dominic watched my hands. He did not look at the paper. His attention was a physical pressure. The brass lamp on his desk gleamed on the dark surface. I tapped Maya's picture in the article. My finger left a faint smudge on the newsprint. "Explain this," I said. His face lost all expression. It was like watching a door slam shut. He picked up the clipping. He studied my sister's smiling face for a long moment. Then he tore the paper in half. The sound was sharp and final in the quiet room. He dropped the pieces on the desk. He never looked away from me. His calm gray eyes were empty. "She was investigating Silas Vance," I said. My voice was a whisper. I leaned forward, my palms flat on the cool wood. I blocked his path around the desk. "Tell me why. Tell me what she found." Dominic stood up. His chair rolled back silently on the thick rug. He placed his hands on the edge of the desk. He leaned toward me. "Knowing is a death sentence, Clara." His voice was low and grave. "Do you really want that for yourself?" I didn't move. I saw the faint tremor in his left hand where it gripped the wood. It was the only crack in his control. He was protecting someone. It wasn't me. It probably wasn't even Maya. It was the code. It was Sila's. I felt a cold fury settle in my chest. It was clean and solid, unlike the fear. "I am already in the sentence," I said. "You put me there, so tell me." He stared at me. A muscle in his jaw flexed once. Then he straightened. He walked to the office door. He opened it. He spoke to the guard outside. His voice was flat and final. "Escort her out. She is a liability I can no longer afford." But why his hand had trembled when he mentioned the code? I still had no answer for that. The cold fury in my gut burned hotter than any of his words. The penthouse hallway was suddenly quiet. I could taste the sterile, filtered air. It was a stark contrast to the office, with its smell of leather and betrayal. Two of Dominic's men stood a few yards away. They were both big and silent. They had their backs to me, speaking in low voices about the order to move me out. A guard's flashlight swept past the open door of the safe room. The beam cut a sharp line across the polished floor. I froze in the hallway. I pressed myself against the wall and held my breath. Their attention was on the main elevator bank. This was my only chance. I slipped into the safe room. The only light came from a green-shaded desk lamp. I went straight to the heavy desk. The physical ledger was right there, just like Dominic had said it would be. I opened the thick cover. The name Vance Pharma was printed at the top of every page. I pulled out my phone with clumsy fingers. I snapped photos of page after page. Each one was a record of payments to shell companies. The paper had a faint, dusty smell. It made me want to sneeze. I took a picture of a key entry. It linked Silas Vance to a numbered offshore account. The door handle rattled. Someone was outside. My blood went cold. I shoved the phone in my pocket. I grabbed the heavy ledger itself. I dove behind the floor-to-ceiling curtains at the far end of the room. I clutched the ledger to my chest. I felt its sharp corners dig into my skin. I heard the door swing open. Boots stepped onto the plush carpet. They walked a few paces into the room. I stopped breathing. The boots paused near the desk. Then they turned. They walked back out. The door clicked shut. The footsteps faded down the hall. I crept out from behind the curtains. My legs felt weak. The ledger was a solid weight in my hands. It was my proof. Could I make it to the service elevator? I peeked into the empty hallway. The two men were gone. They were probably checking the main foyer. I moved fast and quiet on the rug. I found the service door near the kitchen. I pressed the call button. The elevator arrived with a soft ping. Just as the doors began to close, I saw him. Dominic stood at the far end of the main hall. His back was to me. He was looking down at something small and flat in his palm. His shoulders were slumped, just for a second. Then the elevator doors sealed shut. What he was looking at in his hand? I wasn't going to like the answer. My hands still trembled. They felt like they were holding a phantom electricity from clutching that stolen ledger. The laundromat's humid air clung to my skin. It smelled like cheap detergent and overheated cotton. I sat on a cracked orange bench between two churning machines. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I took out the secret phone. I dialed Dominic's number. It was the only one I knew by heart. I ended the call before it could ring. My thumb was sore from chewing on it. I stared at the dark screen and tried to breathe. I dialed again. I pressed the phone to my ear before I could stop myself. He answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" His voice was a low, tight wire. In the background, I heard a car door shut with a solid thud. An engine turned over. He was already moving. "They tried to grab me," I said. My own voice sounded small and far away. The words left me empty. A long silence filled the line. All I could hear was the smooth rumble of his car's engine. I traced a long crack in the bench's plastic with my fingernail. The vinyl was warm from the dryer's heat. I waited for his anger. I waited for his cold logic. "Stay put, I'm coming." He didn't hang up. I listened to the faint sound of his driving. The occasional turn signal clicked. I closed my eyes and held the phone tight. Why was he doing this? I thought of his hand trembling when he mentioned the code. Now I understood. It was the weight of a choice. Protecting me meant breaking his own rules. He was choosing to break them anyway. I felt a dangerous warmth spread through my chest. It was a terrible comfort. Someone in his world was always watching. He knew that better than anyone. "Are you still there?" he asked after a minute. His voice was quieter now, stripped of its usual command. "Yes," I whispered. He let out a slow breath. "Don't say another word, just stay on the line." So I did. I sat in that buzzing, humid room and listened to a dangerous man drive through the night to find me. I didn't know what would happen when he arrived. I didn't move from the bench. The heat from the dryers pressed against my side. I kept the phone to my ear and waited. Why his hand had trembled when he mentioned the code? I'd been wrong to ignore it this long. The cold of the laundromat's tile floor had seeped into my bones. It was a deep ache I couldn't seem to shake. Back in my temporary apartment, I locked the door and slumped against it. I breathed in the stale scent of old carpet and takeout. I pulled the heavy ledger from my bag. The cover was worn dark leather. My shoulder ached from carrying it. I spread the pages on the floor under the harsh kitchen light. The entries were shipping manifests. They had long strings of numbers. They listed medical supplies, things like saline and gauze, but the quantities were huge. I cross-referenced the dates with my phone. Each shipment went out the same day the city logged a delivery to its homeless shelters. A perfect cover. My stomach tightened. This was the proof. Then I saw the pattern. Every third shipment had a different destination code. It was a warehouse address. I knew that part of the docks. It was an old cold storage building. The city decommissioned it years ago. My hands were steady now. I wrote the address on my palm with a shaky pen. This was the hub. This was where Silas Vance was stealing medicine meant for sick people. I felt a hot, clean anger push out the fear. I thought of Dominic then. He was bound by his code to protect a man who did this. I remembered the small, flat object in his hand back at the penthouse. It wasn't a phone. It was a locket. I'd seen the flash of a chain. He was looking at a picture of someone he'd lost, maybe his brother. The realization was a quiet pang in my chest. It didn't change what he was, but it changed how the weight sat on him. I tucked the ledger away. I had my target. I would burn his whole operation down. I moved toward the door. And the memory of that locket flashing in his hand moved with me. My knuckles ached from clenching them around the decrypted shipping manifest for hours. The alley was cold in the pre-dawn dark. My boots crunched on broken glass and dried cement dust. The warehouse was a hulking shadow across the street. A single weak bulb flickered over a side entrance. I pressed my back against the cold brick wall. I just had to see it for myself. I had to make the evidence real. A heavy dumpster gave me cover 20 feet from the door. I took a slow breath and stepped out. 3 men in dark jackets materialized from behind a parked van. They moved fast, cutting off my retreat. I froze. The lead man, bulky with a shaved head, smiled. It was not a kind smile. I pressed a fist to my sternum. I took a step back, but the other 2 fanned out. The scrape of their shoes on the pavement was the only sound. I was trapped. I thought of the ledger in my bag. I thought of Maya. Fear was a cold stone in my throat. A car engine roared to life down the block. Headlights speared the alley, blinding the man in front of me. Tires screeched. A dark sedan mounted the curb and slid to a halt between me and them. The passenger door flew open. Dominic Rossi leaned across the seat. His face was pale and set. "Get in, now." Gunfire erupted. The rear window of the sedan exploded. I didn't think. I ran for the open door. As I dove inside, Dominic shoved me down across the seat. A pained grunt escaped his lips. I saw the dark stain spreading high on his shoulder, soaking his expensive coat. He had put himself between me and the bullets. He slammed the car into reverse, then wrenched the wheel. We fishtailed back onto the road. More bullets pinged off the trunk. Dominic drove one-handed, his other arm hanging stiff at his side. He was breathing in short, sharp bursts. I pulled myself upright, my hands shaking. I watched his profile, the tight line of his mouth, the sweat on his temple. He had broken every rule to come here. He had taken a bullet meant for me. I reached over and pressed my palm hard against his bleeding shoulder. He didn't flinch. He just kept driving, his eyes fixed on the road mirror. And one thing kept pulling at me. Why his other hand kept clenching and unclenching on the wheel. The coppery taste of his blood still coated my tongue. I blinked against the first sharp rays of dawn slicing through a grimy garage window. My back was pressed against a workbench gritty with sawdust. The car was parked in the shadows. Dominic leaned against its hood, his left arm held stiff. His shirt was dark with a wet patch over his ribs. He watched me open a dusty first aid kit I'd found on a shelf. "It's a through and through," he said. His voice was flat. "Clean it, stitch it, nothing more." I soaked a pad with antiseptic. My hands were dirty. "Take off the shirt." He didn't move. The silence stretched. Then with a sharp inhale he began undoing buttons with his right hand. The movement was clumsy. I saw the effort it cost him. I stepped closer. The wound was a raw, red puncture on his flank. I pressed the pad to it. His whole body went rigid, but he didn't make a sound. The garage was quiet except for our breathing. "Why did the locket flash?" I asked. I didn't look up. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then his voice was low, stripped of its usual command. "It was a signal. For my brother Leo. A safe signal we used as kids. Silas knew it." He swallowed. I saw the muscle in his jaw work. "He used it to draw Leo into a trap. I gave him the order to go." My hands stilled. The needle hovered above his skin. This was the crack. He had never spoken his brother's name to me. He looked past me at a rusted tool cabinet. His eyes were distant. "Silas was my right hand for 12 years. He stood at my wedding. He held Leo when he was born." The words were simple. They carved a hole in the room. After Leo died, the ambition in him, it curdled. It became a sickness. I began stitching. The pull of the thread through his skin felt enormous. He didn't flinch. We were close enough that I felt the heat coming off his body. I saw the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the gray in his dark hair. My knuckles brushed his skin once by accident. He went very still. I finished the last knot and cut the thread. My hand rested for a second on the uninjured part of his back, just below his shoulder blade. It was a steadying touch, not a caress. He turned his head slightly toward the contact. Our eyes met. The air between us was heavy and warm. He looked at me, and for a moment the man beneath the boss was right there, unguarded. Then he looked away first. He pulled his ruined shirt back around his shoulders, leaving it open. The moment was gone, but its weight remained, hanging in the dusty dawn light. And why my hand had lingered on his skin a moment too long? I wasn't going to like the answer. The sting of the antiseptic still clung to my fingers. I pushed back from the kitchen table and crossed to where Dominic sat slumped in the armchair. I spread the printed map across his knees. My finger stabbed at the circled warehouse by the docks. The transfer is at dawn. She's there. He pressed a hand to his bandaged side. He didn't look at the map. His eyes were fixed on his buzzing phone on the armrest. Clara, I have 3 crews under fire downtown. Silas is moving now. His voice was flat, tired. My sister is in that building. I grabbed the photos from the table. My hands trembled. I held them in front of his face. Look, public shelter records. That blurred figure in the 3rd floor window, that's her sweater. The delivery schedule matches the ledger codes. It's her. The words came out too fast. They sounded desperate even to me. He finally looked away from his phone. His gray eyes moved from the photos to my face. I saw the conflict there, a deep and tired struggle. He reached out and took one picture from my shaking hand. He studied it for a long moment. His other hand kept clenching and unclenching against his thigh. He looked back at his buzzing phone, then he looked at me again. Something in his expression softened, just for a second. It was the look of a man weighing a duty against a debt. Someone in his world was always watching. But right then he was only watching me, and why his hand kept clenching against his thigh, that wasn't going away. The ache in my jaw was a stubborn knot. In the living room's gloom, the only light came from the green numbers of the microwave clock. We were on the floor, backs against the base of the couch. Dominic was slumped in the armchair nearby. His breathing was low and steady in the dark. I watched the shape of him. His head was tipped back. His right hand rested on his knee, palm up. The fingers were still. Then I saw his thumb begin to move. It rubbed slowly over the inside of his wrist. There was a small, dark shape there, too simple to be a proper Mafia tattoo. I leaned forward a little. It was just a bird, its lines faded with age. My sister's favorite bird, he said. His voice was quiet and rough with tiredness. He wasn't looking at me. He said it like the words had escaped. Then his hand stopped moving. He made a fist, hiding the tattoo from view. I had shifted closer without realizing it. Our shoulders were almost touching. The space between us felt warm and thick. I looked at his profile, at the tight line of his mouth. My hand lifted from my own knee, just an inch toward his arm. I wanted to touch the place where that bird was. I stopped myself. I wrapped my arms around my legs instead and held them tight to my chest. The silence stretched out, full of things we could not say. This world, he began, then stopped. He turned his head and looked right at me. His gray eyes were shadowed. It eats good things. It turns them to ash. Saving someone just gives the fire more time to catch. He let out a slow breath. I am terrified that saving you is just a slower way to burn you. I heard the raw honesty in it, a crack in the stone. I felt a pull in my chest, an ache that had nothing to do with fear. It was the reason my hand had lingered on his skin when I'd stitched his wound. I had needed to know he was real. I looked back at him. When I look at you now, I said, my voice just above a whisper, I don't see a monster anymore. The words hung in the air between us, fragile and true. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, and in that look everything changed. The echo of my own confession still buzzed in my teeth. I found myself tracing the edge of a rusted ammo crate in the staging area. The room smelled of cold metal and dust. Dominic stood across from me, staring at a city map on the wall. His phone buzzed again on the workbench between us. He looked at the screen and his whole posture changed. His shoulders went rigid. He turned his back to me. The door swung open and Leo filled the frame. His thick arms were crossed over his chest. Boss, he said, his voice rough. Silas hit the Southside docks. They torched 3 shipments. Our men are asking for orders. Leo's eyes cut to me. They were full of a hard blame. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. I kept my eyes on Dominic's back. The gray fabric of his jacket was perfectly smooth. I forced my voice to be level. The shelter transfer is in 2 hours, I said to the space between his shoulder blades. Will you be there? I held my breath. The room was so quiet I heard the hum of a fluorescent light overhead. Dominic turned slowly. He looked at Leo's hardened face. Then he looked at my face. His own was a mask. He gave a single, sharp nod to Leo. It was a silent command. Leo's mouth tightened, but he nodded back and left. Dominic walked past where Leo had been standing. He stopped beside me at the crate. Our arms were almost touching. He picked up a spare magazine from the crate. His hand closed around it. His fingers pressed so hard into the metal I thought it might bend. This was the answer. This was why his hand kept clenching against his thigh. It was a physical fight to hold himself still. It's time, he said. His voice was low. He hadn't chosen me. Something else had put us here. There was a difference. He turned and walked toward the door where his car was waiting. He didn't look back to see if I followed. I knew I would. Why he'd needed to hold himself that still. I'd been wrong to ignore it this long. The tension in my jaw was a rigid knot I couldn't force myself to unclench. The sterile chill of the penthouse safe rooms filtered air raised goosebumps on my arms as the door sealed behind us. Dominic, the Mafia boss who held my life, paced near the tinted window. He had his phone pressed to his ear. His free hand was a tight fist at his side. I watched him from the hallway arch. I held my breath until my lungs burned. His voice was low and flat, giving orders about the gala. He was distracted, but I knew his security protocols were still active. The hall closet was 10 steps away. My emergency bag was inside. I had one chance. I slid past the kitchen door, keeping my back to the wall. I pressed a fist to my sternum as if that would help. The floor was polished concrete, cool through my socks. I took slow, quiet steps toward the hall closet. Each one felt too loud. Dominic's voice rose in sudden anger behind me. He said a name. Sela's. I froze mid-step. The air from a ceiling vent brushed the back of my neck. I waited for his pacing to resume. The low rumble of his voice started again. I moved forward. My fingers found the closet door handle. It was cold, brushed metal. Dominic's conversation grew sharper behind me. I heard him say the word betrayal. I eased the door open an inch. The hinge gave a soft creak. I winced and stopped. My eyes adjusted to the dark inside. I saw the shape of my black duffel bag behind a winter coat. I reached for it. My hand closed around the familiar nylon strap. Just then, Dominic's pacing footsteps stopped completely. The sudden silence in the room was worse than any sound. Had he heard the creak? Had he seen me move? I froze, the bag half pulled from the closet. I listened so hard my ears rang. I could only hear the hum of the air filters. Then his footsteps started again, moving away from me toward the window. I let out a shaky breath I didn't know I was holding. I yanked the bag free and shut the closet door as quietly as I could. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. My secret phone was on the small table by the door. I must have left it there earlier. The screen was lit up. It showed the map app, pinning the warehouse location. I had forgotten to close it. I looked from the glowing screen to the window where Dominic stood with his back to me. His shoulders were set in a hard line. I thought about the promise I made in that safe house living room. I thought about my sister Maya, who needed me to be brave. I left the phone right where it was. Then I walked toward the penthouse's service entrance, my bag in hand, and did not look back. Whatever came next, whether Dominic had already seen the map on my phone screen, was the part I hadn't figured out. The frantic thrumming of my pulse still pounded in my ears, a relentless drumbeat from his penthouse. Rain, thin and cold as needles, needled the back of my neck where I crouched behind a dumpster in the warehouse alley. I pulled my knees tight to my chest. The wet cardboard of a discarded box was sticking to my leg. My whole body shook from the cold and the leftover fear. I had run here after the lookouts spotted me. Now I was just a soaked woman hiding in the dark. The cash, the gun, the scars, none of it was normal. I forced them into my jacket pocket anyway. I found the cheap burner phone I kept for Maya. I dialed the only number I knew by heart besides hers. It was Dominic's private line. The rain tapped a steady rhythm on the metal dumpster lid above me. The phone rang once, then twice. It rang a third time and a fourth. No one picked up. I pressed the cold plastic hard against my ear. I curled myself smaller against the rough brick wall. The silence on the other end felt heavier than the rain. I did not know what I wanted him to say. I just needed to hear a voice. On the 7th ring, the call connected. There was no greeting. I heard only the quiet sound of someone breathing. It was slow and even. I knew it was him. My breath caught in my throat. I could not make myself speak either. I just listened. The line stayed open. I counted the seconds in my head. I heard the faint hum of a car engine in the background of his call. Then I understood. He was driving. He was close. He had listened to my silent panic. He had not hung up. The call ended with a soft click. I lowered the phone and just stared at its dark screen. Rain dripped from the ends of my hair onto my cheek. I wiped it away. My hand was shaking. I heard a car door shut somewhere nearby in the alley. The sound was sharp. Final. I held my breath. Slow, deliberate footsteps came toward me on the wet pavement. They stopped on the other side of the dumpster. I saw the shadow of a man fall across the ground in front of me. I didn't move. He didn't come around the corner. He just stood there. I could see the edge of his polished shoe in the dim light. He was giving me a moment. A moment to choose. I stood up on shaky legs. I stepped out from my hiding place to face him. Dominic Rossi looked at me, the man I'd betrayed. His gray eyes weren't angry. They were just tired. A single drop of rain traced a line down his temple. He didn't brush it away. My ribs still ached from pressing against the dumpster. The new chill at the warehouse loading bay carried the sharp smell of solvent and wet concrete. My hand was on the cold metal door handle. Dominic stepped from a shadow right beside it. He blocked my path. "Going somewhere?" he said. I stumbled back. My hand flew to my chest. He looked terrible. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was stained dark on the left side, right where I'd stitched his bullet wound. He told me Silas Vance's plan. He said the warehouse was a trap. He said my sister wasn't inside. He said Silas was hosting a charity gala tomorrow night. That was the real target. His usual cold mask was gone. He looked more than tired. He looked hollow. "You saw the map on my phone," I said. It wasn't a question. He ran a hand over his face. He didn't meet my eyes. He confirmed it with a slow nod. His silence was his answer. He'd known my plan. He'd let me run anyway. He'd watched me from the alley. "Trust me this once," he said. His voice dropped so low I almost didn't hear it. He was close enough for me to see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. He reached out his hand toward my arm. He stopped before making contact. His hand just hung in the air between us. I saw the truth in his weary expression. It wasn't a threat. It was a desperate warning. My sister's safety depended on this choice. Could I believe the man I'd just betrayed? I searched his face for a lie. I found only exhaustion, a grim resolve. I gave a single, sharp nod. I agreed to attend the gala with him, but my eyes darted past his shoulder to the warehouse door. I believed Maya was in there. My agreement was just a door out of this alley, a key to get closer to Silas. Dominic took my nod. He stepped aside from the door. He gestured for me to follow him back to the car. I walked past him. I didn't look back at the warehouse. I made him think I was following. For now, the tension in my jaw was a clenched fist I couldn't uncurl. On the gala's empty balcony, the chill air carried the tinny laughter of guests below. The door behind me opened. Dominic stepped out. His suit was perfect, but his tie was loosened just enough to be real. He didn't look at me at first. He rested his hands on the stone railing and looked down at the city lights. He was quiet for a long time. I saw the way his shoulders rose and fell. A slow, deliberate rhythm, like a man trying to remember how to breathe. I'd only ever seen him still with purpose. A statue of control. This was different. This was the stillness of a weight too heavy to carry. The city noise felt very far away. I waited. "I used to bring my brother up here," he said. His voice was low. He didn't turn. When the family events got too loud, he hated the noise. He paused. I saw his throat work. He'd point out which lights were his favorite restaurants. He never cared about the business. I moved to stand beside him at the railing. Our arms didn't touch, but I felt the heat from his body in the cold air. His hand was flat on the stone. I could see a thin, pale scar across his knuckles. It was old. "You never talk about him," I said. "Talking doesn't bring anyone back." He turned his head then. He looked at me, his gray eyes shadowed. "It just makes the hole feel bigger." His world had almost killed me once. It would try again. But in that moment I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid for him. The space between us was less than a foot. The cold railing bit into my palms. He shifted and his sleeve brushed against mine. Neither of us moved away. I watched his face. He was looking at my mouth, then my eyes, then down at my hands. He seemed to be deciding something. Without a word, Dominic reached into his jacket. He took my right hand and turned it palm up. His own hand was warm. He placed a small, ornate key in my center. It was heavy, cold. He closed my fingers around it. His hand stayed over mine for a second, holding the key between our palms. Then he let go. He turned and walked back toward the door, leaving me alone with the weight of metal in my hand, and everything he had not said. The key was still a cold weight in my hand when I sat down at the head table. Silas Vance's cologne was thick in the air, sharp and expensive. It cut right through the smell of dessert wine. He was talking, his voice smooth, gesturing at the city lights outside the window. He was talking about civic renewal of all things. Dominic sat beside me completely still. His silence felt heavier than all of Silas's words. I felt the hard corner of the ledger in my bag pressed against my ankle. My plan was simple. Wait for Dominic's signal. Stand up. Expose everything. Silas finished his point and paused. He looked right at our table. His smile stayed, but his eyes went flat. "Progress requires new alliances," he said. His voice carried across the quiet room. "Even unexpected ones, like our own Dominic Rossi, who has so generously expanded his family." He gestured right at me. The whole room looked my way. "Let's welcome his newest asset, Clara Finch, a woman of remarkable flexibility." He let the word hang there. A few people on his side of the room laughed. My face went hot. I stopped breathing. This wasn't the plan. Next to me, I saw Dominic's hand on the tablecloth. It closed into a tight fist. The skin over his knuckles went white, but he didn't look at me. He kept his eyes locked on Sela's. His anger was a quiet wave I could feel from inches away. I was frozen. The shame felt like a physical weight. I wanted the floor to open up. Then I thought of Maya. I thought of her photo in the warehouse window. The ledger in my bag was real. His words were just air. I stood up. The chair legs scraped loud on the marble. Every head turned. Sela's perfect smile flickered for just a second. I reached down and pulled the heavy ledger from my bag. I didn't look at Dominic. I lifted the book and slammed it down on the table. The glasses shook and rang. "This is Silas Vance's real charity work," I said. My voice was louder than I expected. It didn't shake. "Shipments of stolen medicine rerouted through city shelters. It's all in here, the dates, the routes, the fake invoices." I looked right at Silas. His face was a blank, cold mask. And outside in the distance, the first police siren started to rise. My knuckles still ached from slamming the ledger down. The air smelled like spilled whiskey now and panic. Police in dark uniforms pushed through the crowd towards our table. They were focused on Silas. He was backing away, his smile gone. His face was just a rigid line of fury. He didn't run. He moved fast towards the nearest officer. His hand went inside his jacket. I saw the officer's eyes widen. His own hand went to his hip. "Gun!" someone screamed. My body locked. I could only watch. Silas Vance, a man who planned everything, was choosing a final public defiance. He would not be taken quietly. He would make them shoot. Dominic moved before I could react. He stepped right into Silas's path, his own hands held open and away from his body. He put himself between Silas and the line of police guns. "Silas." His voice cut through the noise. It was calm, absolute. That one word held a lifetime. Silas froze, his hand still hidden in his jacket. Dominic looked only at him. The vein at his temple stood out. I saw his chest rise once, a deep breath. He was giving Silas a choice only they would understand. Then Dominic turned his back on Silas. He faced me. His gray eyes found mine for a long second. I saw the calculation there, and the surrender. He reached inside his own suit jacket. He drew his gun. He held it by the barrel. Without a word, he placed it carefully on the white plate in front of Silas's empty chair. It was the ultimate gesture. He was disarming his own power. My phone buzzed against my thigh. I pulled it out. A single text. "Maya secure." I looked back at Dominic and gave the smallest nod. His shoulders lowered just a fraction. The police surged forward. They seized Silas. Then they turned and surrounded Dominic. The ghost of his touch was still on my palm. The interview room's fluorescent light hummed, a single note that buzzed in my throat. I watched through the one-way mirror. Dominic sat alone at a metal table. His suit jacket was gone. His sleeves were rolled up. A detective I didn't know leaned against the wall opposite him. He tapped a file against his leg. "Let's go over it again, Mr. Rossi," the detective said. His voice came through the speaker tinny and flat. "You claim Silas Vance acted alone. You say he used your resources without your knowledge." Dominic didn't move. He looked at the wall above the detective's head. His eyes were calm, empty. "That is correct. And your people, your soldiers, they just followed his orders. They followed the chain of command. I was distracted." For a second, his eyes flicked to the mirror. To me, his shoulders were perfectly straight. "Personal matters." The detective opened the file. He slid a photo across the table. It was a picture of the ledger, the one I stole, and this. "This detailed accounting. You never saw this." "No," Dominic's answer was immediate. "Silas handled the books. I trusted him. That was my error." I pressed my hand flat against the cool glass. He was lying. For me, every single lie was a brick in a wall between him and his old life. The detective kept pushing. He asked about the warehouse, the gunfire, the timing. Dominic's answers were clean, sharp. They painted Silas as a greedy traitor. They painted Dominic as a boss who got played. He never looked at the detective. He looked at the mirror. At me. His right hand rested on the table, fingers spread wide. I saw a small, fresh cut across the back of his hand. It was red and raw. The detective finally slammed the file shut. "You expect me to believe you're just walking away, turning evidence and retiring?" Dominic leaned forward then. He put both hands on the table. His voice was low but clear through the speaker. "I am not turning state's evidence. I am giving a statement. I am done. The city is yours. He said it like he was stating the weather. There was no plea, no deal, it was just a fact. He was surrendering his kingdom and asking for nothing in return. He did it to cut Silas out. He did it so my sister's rescue was clean. He did it so I could walk away untouched. My throat closed. I couldn't swallow. I stayed because leaving would mean his sacrifice was for nothing. The ache in my jaw from clenching it bloomed into a full, dull pain. The antiseptic chill of the hospital room seeped through my sweater the moment I stepped inside. My sister Maya was sitting up in the narrow bed. The harsh light bleached the color from her face. She looked so small. A bandage was taped to her forearm. I forced my shoulders to relax and walked to her side. "Hey," I said. My voice sounded strange in the quiet room. "They said I could leave," Maya said. Her eyes were wide and fixed on me. "They asked a lot of questions." I told them I didn't remember anything after the bus stop. I said I hit my head. She reached for my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "Clara, what really happened? Who were those men?" I sat on the edge of the bed. I kept my face calm. "It was a mistake, Maya, a terrible mix-up with some bad people. It's over now. The man who took you is in custody." I squeezed her hand. "We don't have to talk about it anymore." "But your phone calls," she whispered. "The way you were acting. That man, Dominic." She saw my bag by the door, the one I'd packed for running. Her breath hitched. "You're lying to me. You're scared right now." I stood up and got the bag. I unzipped it and pulled out the new identity folder. The one Dominic had given me on the balcony. I placed it in her lap. "This is for you. A new name, a new place to live. A clean start, far from here. A good art school is already lined up." Maya stared at the documents. Her lower lip trembled. "What about you?" "I'll follow when I can. I have to tie up some loose ends here." The lie was smooth and heavy in my mouth. "You need to go tonight. There's a car waiting at the service exit." She looked from the folder to my face. I saw the moment her trust won out over her fear. She nodded slowly. "Okay." She pushed the blankets back. Her movements were stiff. I helped her into her shoes, my own heart a hard drumbeat against my ribs. I was sending her into safety. And I was staying in the storm. That was the choice. The sterile scent of the hospital's bleach still coated the back of my throat. I stood at the edge of the empty park, watching the first pale light catch the dew on a spiderweb. Dominic stood beside me, a few feet away. He wore a dark coat I had never seen before. The city was quiet. He turned his head toward me. The new scar on his temple was raw and red. He looked at me for a second too long. I didn't know what it meant. He didn't speak. "She sent a picture," I said. My voice sounded small in the dawn air. "Maya from her new place, a window box with yellow flowers." I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. He leaned in to see. His arm brushed against my shoulder. He didn't move away. "She said the sun hits it in the morning. She said it was the first thing she noticed." He studied the picture, his gray eyes tracing the details. He let out a slow breath, a faint cloud in the cold air. "Good," he said. His voice was low. He didn't look away from the phone. "That's what you wanted. A safe place for her to notice things." He finally handed the phone back. His fingers were warm against mine. We stood there, close enough that I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. The space between us felt thin and full. "You could notice things too," I said. The words were out before I could stop them. He went very still. He looked down at the damp grass, then back at my face. Something in his expression closed off. A door shutting softly. "Clara," he said. He said my name like it was a fact. "The man who notices flower boxes is not the man who survives my world. And the man I am, he doesn't get to keep the box." He took a small step back. The distance felt like a canyon. I saw his throat move as he swallowed. He gave me one last look, a look that held everything we couldn't say. Then he turned and walked toward the waiting car at the curb without looking back. The car door closed with a quiet, final sound. The engine started, smooth and expensive, and pulled away from the curb. I stood there on the wet grass, holding my phone. The picture of Maya's flowers was still glowing on the screen. He was gone. But the man I wasn't supposed to keep? I still had no answer for that. I watched the black car disappear around the corner. The sun was fully up now, washing the street in a cold, clean light. It felt like the end of something, or maybe just the start of a very long silence. I walked back to my apartment. The streets were empty. My own footsteps were the only sound. And here's the thing, I knew he was right. A man who notices flower boxes doesn't survive in his world. I'd seen the proof of that in an alley in the stockroom in his own bruised hands. But I also knew what I'd seen in his eyes just before he shut that door. It wasn't nothing. Real quick, if you've been holding your breath for these two to figure it out, hit subscribe. The story isn't over until you say it is. Back inside, the quiet was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. I put the kettle on. I stared at the little blue flame. My mind kept circling back to one moment, him leaning in to look at Maya's picture. His arm against my shoulder, the warmth of his fingers. He could have just taken the phone. He didn't have to get that close, but he did. A week went by, then two, no word. No black car idling outside, nothing. I went to work. I came home. I looked at my own windowsill, bare and clean, and I thought about boxes. The ones we put people in, the ones we put ourselves in, the ones we think we can't have. Dominic Rossi had put himself in a box a long time ago, a box labeled survival. He'd sealed it shut. I understood that, but I'd seen the cracks. The way he'd asked about Maya, not just as a problem to solve, but as a person, the raw, furious care in his violence. The way he'd stood in my kitchen, a king in exile, and made me tea. That wasn't just a monster. That was a man. And the man I wasn't supposed to keep. Maybe the answer wasn't for him to get out. Maybe it was for me to finally see what was already there. The knock on my door came on a Tuesday night. It was raining. It wasn't a polite knock. It was solid, cert. My heart did that thing, a hard, sudden beat against my ribs. I knew who it was before I looked through the peephole. I opened the door. Dominic stood there in the hallway. He wasn't wearing a suit, just dark jeans and a simple black sweater. He was soaked. Rain dripped from his hair onto the shoulders of his jacket. He looked tired and real. He didn't say hello. He just looked at me, his gray eyes holding mine in the dim hall light. "The flowers," he said, his voice rough. "In the picture, they were marigolds." I stared at him. The air left my lungs. He'd noticed. He'd remembered. He took a slow step forward over my threshold. Water pooled on the floor at his feet. "I don't know how to be the man who keeps the box, Clara," he said, his voice low. But I saw it, and I couldn't stop seeing it. He was here in my space, dripping rain on my floor, telling me he'd seen the marigolds. I didn't move. I couldn't. He reached out, his hand coming up slowly. He didn't touch me. He just brushed a stray strand of hair from my face, his fingertips barely grazing my temple. It was the gentlest I'd ever seen him. "So?" he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'm here, with no answer, just this." And that was it. That was the choice. Not a promise of safety. Not a fairy tale. Just a dangerous man standing in my doorway telling me he'd seen the flowers. The man I wasn't supposed to keep was offering me all he had, which was nothing and everything. I looked at his hand, still hovering near my face. I looked back into his tired, honest eyes, and finally I knew my answer. "So what do you think she did? Did she close the door, or did she let the storm in? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to be the first to know what happens next in stories like this, hit that subscribe button.